Hi, I'm Riyaz Safi, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Spotify, and Apple Podcast, and in that way, you'll never miss another episode. COVID-19 has taught us to press the pause button and reflect on life and be grateful for all that we have. As many people are praying for what you have. In life, they say there are givers and takers. And as Marlo Thomas said, the takers may eat better, but the givers sleep better. In this episode, I catch up with Hasina Kathrada, a communications consultant, a runner, ambassador for Women for Change in South Africa, and Africa Muslim Agency. Hasina recently traveled to Lebanon, and today we chat to her about her experiences and the lessons that she's learned from her trip. Hi, Hasina, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud.
Hello, Riaz, and thank you so much for having me.
It certainly is a pleasure. Now, I must confess, I remember you as a newsreader on TV. It must have been a long journey for you. If you were to take a step back and reminisce, share with us some of those memories.
Sure, it really was a long time ago. So I studied journalism straight after school, and I got my degree in journalism at Rhodes University in the early 90s. I then worked for a community-based newspaper, which I'm sure you're familiar with, The Indicator.
Yes, of course.
And veteran journalist, Echo Wire.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at the newspaper for a year, thinking that, my career was meant to be in print journalism. Because that's what I'd specialized in at university. But I think my expectations were, not met in that initial year. I wasn't excited about print media at the time. And I started looking at other avenues of journalism, and the second year of my career, I started working at the SABC in broadcast journalism, and in particular in TV news.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my experience has been in TV news, in TV production. I did take two breaks from broadcast journalism. One was to work on a project for news for children.
Mm-hmm.
In Africa,
Yes.
Which was quite exciting and quite new. We started the first news program for children in South Africa, and then did training in Zambia, Indonesia. Starting up children's news programs with the NGO called Free Voice. My second break that I took was when I had a stint at radio, community radio and Islamic radio, when I worked for Channel Islam International for about 6 months.
Wow.
And then eventually, about a year and a half ago, 2 years almost, I started my own communications company and decided that I wanted to have more freedom to work on different projects. And that's how my communications company came about.
Yeah, I remember also having studied communications. One of the things that I've learned always is when you write as well, they said always write and communicate in a way that if your grandmother were to read what you wrote or said, she'll understand. And that was something that always stuck in my mind.
Exactly. We often forget who we're writing for. And sometimes we ourselves don't understand, coined phrases.
Yes.
And we use them. And recently, I was doing some health communications, and I interviewed a doctor, and he said to me, I'm so happy. He was telling me about his experience with COVID at a hospital in Cape Town. And he said, yes, there is so much distress and pain that we've all experienced during this pandemic. But one of the things that he was so grateful for was that people in the street knew what comorbidities meant. And absolutely, when the Minister of Health first used the word comorbidities, I was like, what? And, as time passed, it was so frequently used. And we had to find out, okay, what exactly is a comorbidity. So with communications, and especially with children's use, I found myself learning so much, because I would always ask, oh, okay, what does that actually mean? How do I explain that to a child? And another thing is that, when it comes to children are very honest and in their responses, and would give you the best answers, and ask the very pertinent and very interesting questions. So I think I learned a lot from the children.
Yes, and also another thing, I mean, I have two nephews as well. And from that perspective, it's amazing how they learn things without judging, etc. And that's a great form of learning and asking questions where we come with preconceived ideas about things and situations. I think that's a difference, perhaps.
Yes, definitely. So news stories are often told, in a certain way. And for instance, if we talk about Palestine and what you read in mainstream media, or you talk about, there's a lot of usage of words like Islamic extremists or infiltrators. And if you really telling the Palestinian story, it becomes then an added responsibility to make sure that you're explaining, things in context, and you explaining and you giving historical background, and you have to make use of others, like for instance animations and graphics, to actually make children understand what a situation is really all about. Even something like, a storm, or a natural disaster, it becomes important to actually make children understand how people are affected. At the end of the day, every story, at the heart of every story, is a person, and people there are people involved. And I think sometimes we forget, when we get into a news rut, that it's actually people that we are talking about, and it's people that are affected. And the approach is so important.
Now, a question I always wanted to ask you, and it's something totally unrelated with this. Are you actually related to the late Mr. Kathrada?
He's not my father. So, did think we are related, yes, but
Wow.
not extremely closely. But obviously, Uncle Kathy remained a huge inspiration and influence throughout my life, growing up as well. And I'm very proud. There's a joke that I'll tell you about, that
Yes.
when I was doing the news, Uncle Kathy said, "Oh, so there's another Kathrada now that's getting more famous than me." And of course, I was nowhere near his levels of, of people knowing him, and his contribution to our struggle, and the impact he made on people. But I remain extremely proud to be, associated with him.
At present, you are a communications consultant, and you spoke about the company a bit earlier. Tell us a bit more about the work you're involved in.
Okay, so I at the time, when I started the company, I felt like I wanted diversity, and I wanted a little bit more freedom to explore different, avenues of my work. So what I do is, I have clients that want their profiles raised, or companies that want media expertise. And that's the kind of service that I provide. It hasn't been too long, but it's going well. It started off well, and it's going well. And I'm really, grateful that throughout COVID, that I've managed to continue working. And one of my big moments when I realized that this is what I want to do, and I was approached by the Doha debates. It's the Doha debates is produced by the Qatar Foundation.
Yes.
They're based in the United States, and they produce 6 productions, live TV productions a year in different countries.
Wow.
On different subjects. So I was approached to produce for them in 2019. They hosted the Doha debates in Cape Town, and the issue was water scarcity. At the time, Cape Town was going through its water shortages. So the guests that the Doha debates brings to the country that they're hosting in are international guests, and they bring in a production team from overseas, and it's really, it's live streamed. ENCA carried the debate live here in South Africa, and the Doha debates actually does some amazing work. With podcasts, and they also produce material for tertiary institutions, for schools. And the whole idea of the debate is actually not to oppose one another, but to actually engage. And the Middle Eastern concept of the majlis is used, where you have a moderator and you have people with opposing views, and you come together to discuss and to find solutions and to move forward. It's really a project that I enjoyed, and and that's what got me started, I think, going on my own, that I could work on projects like that.
Sounds amazing. I'm going to check that out for sure. I have been following you on social media, and that's how I learned about your recent trip to Lebanon, and thought it would be great for us to catch up and chat to you about your experiences. Now, you were actually part of this women's delegation with the Africa Muslim Agency that rolled out a campaign. When and how did you decide to be part of this project?
Okay, so I followed one of the women on the group on Instagram, and she'd been on a previous delegation. And I looked at the work that they did it was a delegation that went to Lebanon. And I sent a message. It was a couple of months ago, and I sent a message and I said, if ever an opportunity arises where, there's another group that goes, will you please consider me? And the way it works is that you go as a volunteer.
Yes.
You pay your own way, but you go with Africa Muslims Agency, and you meet their team on the ground in Lebanon, and everything is arranged. The itinerary is arranged. They do amazing work in Lebanon on the ground. Their team works really hard there. So they took care of the logistics, and we went as a group. I lost my mom last year in August, and I've been struggling a little bit and doing a lot of introspection, and I felt I wanted to do something that would give me some kind of fulfillment. Yes. And I'll just take a little bit, a minute or less even, to tell you, about my mother and why this trip is related to her.
Yes, please do.
So my mom was really, very kind person and very, friendly. And there was no limit or there was no boundary to the type of person, to the type of people she would engage in. So my mom would always reach out to the underdog. It was always, the little children that, I mean, she lived in Durban on the beachfront. So it was always, if she went for a walk downstairs, it was always the kids that were, homeless there, that were just hanging around there, that she would, reach out to, or, anyone that she felt didn't have enough. She always reached out to them and, kind of had this amazing capacity and empathy towards other people. And, often I was a little harsh with her and would say, be at a robot, and my mom would roll down the window and want to, give money to the kids that were, standing at the robots. And I tell her, Mom, this is Joburg, it's dangerous. Like, you can't just roll down the window here.
Yes.
And she said, oh, shame. But, and after she passed on, I just kept feeling the sense that, it, like her heart, it was something about her heart that was so special. And I wanted to do something, and I felt like I needed to feel something. I wanted that softness, and I wanted that tenderness that she had. And the thing is, everybody kept saying, you look just like your mom, you look just like your mom. And I would think about it and say, I wish I was like her, in the sense where I cared as much as she did for other people. And I was affected as much as she was by the plight of other people. And, she never kept anything for herself. I mean, if she had stuff, it was always like, she was giving stuff away all the time. So by the time she passed away, there wasn't anything that she had clung to, and that, like how we keep things and say, I'm going to keep this and I'm going to use this when this day arrives. She wasn't that kind of person. And like I felt like I was, where I would keep like, oh, there's certain dishes I'm going to use on a certain special occasion. And my mom wasn't like that. And I felt like it was something that I needed to experience and I felt like this was the right time to do it. And so I then was approached by Africa Muslim Agency to say there's a delegation, women's delegation going, and in like 3 weeks time, and if are you keen to do it? And first I thought, okay, let me go as a media person, let me go and write about it, and for the sole purpose of raising awareness and coming back and doing media stuff. And then I actually then slept over it and thought, no, I don't want to go as a journalist. I want to go as me, and I want to experience this for me. And that's what I did. And it was different in the sense, I've been of going out and knowing that you're coming back to report on this, or you're going to be there and you're going to report from there on the situation. It took that pressure away from me and allowed me to experience what I was seeing and what I was feeling as just myself. And of course, I did share some of my experiences on social media.
Yes.
And that was just my personal experience. And, funny enough, so many people, contacted me and said, they really enjoyed that kind of thing. And all I did was, just tell a little story with some photos.
That's amazing. I must be honest with you. That's how come I picked this story up. I follow Catherine as well, so I interviewed her a couple of months back. So I saw her posting and then your post as well. So I thought it'd be great for us to catch up. And thank you for that most inspiring story, because it makes you think, sit back and about life. And also, like you said, we cling on to things when we have so much more than most people out there. But the question that's coming to my mind right now, this was the first time that you embarked on such a project where you were not going to report back, you were just going and being a volunteer. Were you not afraid?
Um, I think I was afraid. I think I was afraid that I wasn't, I wasn't geared up in the sense of, humanitarian work is selfless. I mean, you got to forget everything, and you have to keep reminding yourself of what is your intention of being there. So if I'm never been used to that way. I mean, if you a journalist and you're reporting on TV, yes, you have to worry about, you got to look presentable and credible on TV. You got to say the right things. You got to, you got to balance what you're saying. You've got to be objective. And this was completely different. And I think I realized before I left that there was a level of honesty that was going to be required of me, and that I needed to be prepared for that. And I could not do this and, be afraid of what I was going to see. And I was told that I would be hugely impacted and I would not return home the same person that I was. And that's scary. That is scary because you're not sure what is it that's going to change about you. What is it that you're going to feel before you leave? So yes, I was apprehensive. I wasn't sure what the program was like. But when I got there and when we were met by the team there, I mean, we were assured of security. We were assured that we would be taken care of. But when I got there, I mean, I felt really assured by the people that, that were leading us. And the lady, that led us is an amazing woman called Jihan. And Jihan studied journalism as well. And then, has been doing humanitarian work for the last 20 years. So I kind of felt, actually this is what I was supposed to do. And I then decided, okay, the program was, I must tell you, was intense. We would go out from the morning and return like late at night with very little break in between. I mean, we didn't break at all for lunchtime. We would just eat when we were done for the day. So she actually made sure that we maximized on the time that we had there. We were in Beirut, we were in the south of Lebanon and the north of Lebanon. So we basically covered the whole of Lebanon in the time that we were there.
How many days were you there for?
We left on Wednesday, arrived in Lebanon on Thursday morning. We worked the entire day on Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and we left again on Tuesday.
Wow. So a short trip, but lots that you've done in that period. Now, describe to me in detail, what did it feel like when you first arrived at these refugee camps? What are some of the feelings and thoughts that you had at that moment personally for you?
Before I get to the refugee camps, if I can just tell you about our first day when
Of
we
course,
went
yes.
to
Please do.
the site of the Beirut Explosion.
Yes.
Because part of what Africa Muslims Agency's More Than a Meal campaign does is to support the victims of the Beirut blast. Now,
Ah.
this includes Lebanese citizens,
Mhm.
Muslim and Christian, um, and their program also supports refugees, which are Palestinian and Syrian. But the refugees, the victims of the blast, that blast killed more than 200 people. It was the worst non-nuclear explosion in history. And we got to see the site of the blast. We got to see the wheat reserves nearby that actually, if they were not where they are today, that blast would have killed thousands of people. So it's actually the reinforced concrete from the wheat reserves nearby that absorbed the shock of the blast.
Wow.
And yet, more than 200 people died, 15,000 injuries. There's still about 100 people that are unaccounted for, and 300,000 homeless after the blast. So the devastation from that blast is huge. Now remember, the blast happened at the time in Lebanon had experienced a revolution. The economy is in dire straits. Then you got this huge catastrophe that happens, and then you have COVID. So this country is going through all these things. So can you imagine the impact on the people that live in the country? And we went to the blast, and we saw the devastation in the surrounding areas. We saw the buildings that were destroyed. I mean, if you look at the rubble, you can still see like remnants of things from people's homes. And we're walking around there, and as we're leaving, we bump into this elderly lady, very frail. And she stops. She actually stopped me, and she speaks to me in Arabic, and Shihan came and spoke to her. And we ended up spending an extra half an hour with her because she was crying, saying that you came all the way from South Africa because you think about us, and you came to help us. And it was not on the itinerary, just bumped into her. And she told us about the blast, what she was doing, how it happened, and how they've been suffering ever since it took place. And later that night, we went to a home that Africa Muslims Agency aids. And we met a father and two of his daughters. They called Dina and Diana. Dina is 16 and Diana is 18.
Yes.
So Dina and Diana's home is near the site of the explosion. They were actually 5 sisters and their mom and their dad. In the explosion, they lost 3 sisters and they lost their mom. And Dina was under the rubble for 11 hours and she survived.
Wow.
And next to her, lying next to her, was her mom. And her mom was lying next to her and she was holding her mom and trying to keep her mom alive. And her mom passed away, and she said in Arabic something like, and when they translated it, it was like, I'm going to God, and it was very, the way I understood it, it was like inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong, and to him do we return. And her mom said that to her and passed away. So when she was rescued eventually after 11 hours, she then had to have extensive rehabilitation. And Africa Muslim Agency, provided that support for her. And on the day that we met her, she actually took like her first steps with the aid of a walker. And she took a couple of steps, but extremely frail still. And the 16-year-old sister then knew that her mum had passed away, her sisters had passed away. But what, and Gina, Jihan found her at the site of the explosion and then tells Jihan, what can I do to help? Because, they were on the ground now helping victims and seeing whatever they can do for them. She volunteered on the spot there, having just lost members of her own family. And the father then, also spoke to us. And they now have a new home that Africa Muslims Agency, arranged for them. And they took us to see their rooms and, welcomed us into their home. And you just see a very broken man. I mean, you're a family of 7 and then now you're 3. And obviously the girls miss their mother. And it was really, really sad. But the strength of the girls is something that, that's what I took from them. That amid all their pain and all their suffering, they're still living, and they still have dreams, and they still, their dad still takes care of them. So yeah, that was day 1. And after day 1, I thought, sure, this is really something. And then we went to another family, also a Lebanese family. Here, the Mirna has a little son, and she needed milk, and she lives with her mother and father. So she needed milk for her 2-year-old, and she said she's just dashing off to the shops. And her mum said, just leave the little boy, Chris, with me, because you're just going, for a quick, you dashing out. And she said no, and she carried him and she took him. When the blast happened, she lost Chris, and her eyeball popped out of the socket. She held on to, but she was frantically searching for her son. She searched for a couple of hours. She went to all the hospitals, and someone found Chris and took him to the hospital, and she found him. And she forgot that her eye, what had happened to her eye. And only after she found him, and then she said that was the most joyful moment of her life, when she held him and realized she hadn't lost him. And then she went and, had to have her eye attended to. That was very touching. And it was like she said, there were 3 generations when her mom was at home and then called the neighbors and asked them to go out to search for her. She was searching for her son. So it was generations that, at the same time, this was happening. So yeah, some very powerful stories.
Very, very indeed. Now, when you got to the refugee camp, there must have been some stories from there as well that resonate with you. What is one that you'd like to add to the ones you already told us about?
Okay, so we went to, quite a few refugee camps.
Yes.
And I think that one that there were many that were, I don't think I'll ever forget. But the one that I felt, I felt extremely sad, about was also involving a 16-year-old girl. And we got to her house, and her mom, her mom did all the talking, told us, about the situation. And when we tried chatting to the young girl, what are your dreams? What do you like to do? It is very bland. She was like, nothing. I just want to look after my family. But do you have any, hobbies? No. There was nothing coming out of this girl. And then, we stayed for a while, and eventually, it emerged that she had been to a granny's house one day, and they were heating water, and she burned. So entire one of her legs is completely burned and scarred. And the way I looked at it, she was actually depressed. Her mom said, she doesn't go out at all. She doesn't talk to anyone. She's just quiet. And then we sat and we, chatted with her for a little bit. And then she told us that she actually wants to be a photographer.
Wow.
She wants to tell the stories of her people. She's a Palestinian refugee. Wants to tell the stories of her people. And that's why she wants to be a photographer. She wants to tell the stories of the refugees. And what does she like to photograph now? She loves landscapes. And then, we said to her, show us some of the pictures you've taken. And she's talented. So I think the point of that whole story was that just the desperation that all I want to do is to help to take care of my family. And she didn't want her mom. Her mom goes out to work. She didn't want her mom to go out to work. She just wanted her mom to, just scared for what would happen to her, that she would lose her mom, and that she'd be left alone. And because she was the eldest of the siblings, I think that was her concern.
And
There were
rightfully
many
so.
stories like that, of children. The one little boy whose father had died in a prison in Syria, and the granny was then taking care of him and his mum and the other siblings. But the granny herself was taking care of two disabled children. So she was about 60, but the toll on her, you could see she looked about 20 years older. But she was really this wise old woman, and we asked her, what advice do you have for us? And she said, never ever get sad. Never ever get sad and ask why you're being afflicted in a certain way, or why your life is hard. And we said, and like, why? What do you do? She said, you never lose faith that God is with you, that He will take care of you. And she carries her disabled children. She carries them, and she cares for them physically with her physical strength, apart from mentally. And she had COVID, and she had to go to hospital for 3 or 4 days. So her neighbors then took care of her family while she was away. So it's just the huge hearts that these people have, that they look after each other. And, even if it's picking leaves and making food from leaves that they've picked, that mothers will go out and do this and still not feel that, I give up. Life is too hard. How do I feed my baby? There's not enough. There's nothing to feed the baby. There's malnutrition, on health issues with the children.
Yes.
And, and poverty on such a level that I think as a parent, myself as a parent, I think, how do you cope when you can't provide food for your children? When you can't give them the medical treatment that they need? how do you cope as a parent, and not give up and still have that kind of faith? It was such an eye opener, and I think that was such a big message for me.
Lastly, if you were to sit back and reflect about your trip, what are the 3 life lessons that you've learned and that you'd like to share with us on Thinking Out Loud?
I think definitely the power of faith and unwavering faith can get you through anything. Secondly, that you should not take anything or any moment or any time in your life for granted. And that we're here with a purpose, and that we should use that time, and we should use what we have, and we should use the talent and just our very existence meaningfully. And then I think the third one would be to always remain true to yourself and to make the most of. We all have courage and we all have strength. And I think we often doubt whether we do have those qualities. And if you stay true to yourself and you tap into that inner strength and that inner courage, I think that, the world is waiting for that. And we shouldn't waste any time in not giving back to what the world is waiting for from us as individual people. And it's not about, who you are. It's every one of us. It's not me that was, had this special gift to give on this trip, and me that did, experience something amazing. Every one of us has that courage and that bravery, and we need to tap into it and to use it and to get it out there. It's within us. And I absolutely have, what I've seen in the last week from the people of Lebanon, the people in the refugee camps, it is so clear that human beings have that resilience and that strength within them. And in our cases, we're not tested on that level where we need to, to harness that. But I think that we should and we must.
Thank you so much, Hasina Kathrada, for chatting to us right here and Thinking Out Loud.
Thank you, Riaz.
Over the next couple of weeks, we feature a variety of guests who will help us find answers to questions we often think about, but rarely ask on Thinking Out Loud. This is Riaz Safi saying thank you so much for listening. Till the next episode, bye for now.